Hello and welcome to Insiders, a podcast all about the world of television with me, Peter Fincham.
And me, Jimmy Mulville.
This is the podcast for people who love TV and who want to know a bit more about what goes on behind the scenes.
So what is it this week?
Oh, well, we've a new series started this week, Jim, by John Morton, written and directed by John Morton.
Yes.
2026.
Oh, I want to watch that.
I don't want to. This podcast is not for us to plug our own work, but I think it's brilliant and do watch it.
And it's got the same...
It's got Ian Fletcher, the character played by Hugh Bonneville.
Brilliant, yeah.
Who was previously the head of values at the BBC.
Head of values at the BBC.
Before that, he launched the 2012 Olympics in London,
and now
which of course was a great success.
Yeah.
Now he's been recruited as the Director of Integrity for 2026, an event taking place with football in America. I'm choosing my words carefully.
Yeah.
Because we're not allowed to mention the organisation behind it. It's mentioned but continually with bleep, so you just hear the word F. You probably know the name of the
Which is
organiser.
quite appropriate.
Indeed.
So
we don't ever call it quite.
And why aren't you allowed? You do it for legal reasons.
A mixture of legal and comic, I would say, because it works quite well comically to avoid it, but you don't want to tangle with that organisation legally.
No.
You know, what's he called? Infantino?
Yeah.
That man?
Well, he's like a kind of mafia don, isn't
I don't
he?
think you want to come into the office in the morning and find a letter from his lawyers.
Or wake up in your bed and find a horse's head next to you.
We might not even be able to say that on this podcast.
Oh, it's a joke.
Signore
Infantino,
I know
you say
amount
this,
about him. There's no evidence so far that he's got a
say
sense
this
of humour.
on the day of my daughter's wedding. I'm sure he's not. I'm sure he's a perfectly nice man. He's not. I don't know why we're implying he's a member of the mafia.
I've got a horrible feeling he isn't a very nice man. But let's
he's a very bold man.
He's the man. Hang on. He's the man who created. We can say the word now. Created a FIFA Peace Prize and gave it to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Now, whatever satire John Morton comes up with, and he's a brilliant satirist, that's beyond satire.
Yeah. Will they give it every year?
Will they give it back? Will Donald Trump have to give it back?
They'll give it to Joey Barton next year?
Who knows? So that's on this week. And you got, by the way, I noticed, I've got news for you is running. So let's plug one of your shows.
It started last week.
You've got Monty Don hosting this week.
Yes.
It's an interesting booking.
Yeah.
I'd love to know a bit about what conversations go on at Hattrick about who is and isn't a good guest host. Who's not made the grade over the years, or who have you regretted? Yeah, come on, give us some colour.
No, we've had some really brilliant people. I mean, you know, we were forced to get the rotating hosts in, Peter, because
we don't need to go.
We don't need to go down that road.
Yes.
When
Angus Deaton was badly represented.
It was one of your clients at the time, and yes, he was very badly represented by his agent. But we had some, you know, really unexpected delights. We once got William Shatner on.
Wow.
And I'd heard on the grapevine he'd do anything for $50,000. Right. Literally anything. So we discovered he was in Berlin, and we got hold of him. I don't know how. We found out where he was staying. And he agreed to come and host the show that week. He had no idea where he was, what the show was.
He'd never seen the show?
He'd never seen the show.
Could he read an autocue?
Yes. And boy, he was great with the audience. I mean, he was great with... I think I've told this on the podcast before, where he went on about Ilfracombe at one point, a story that was set in Ilfracombe.
In Devon.
And Paul Merton said, "You've never been to... You've got no idea where Ilfracombe is, have you?" "Of course I have. I know it very well. It's laced with prostitutes." and the following day, we got a complaint from the MP for Ilfracombe, who said he's going to raise it in the House of Parliament who cast aspersions on his town. So
it's the most publicity Ilfracombe's had for decades. So
but we've never, and also we can speed things up in the edit. So Neil Kinnock, God bless him, came on, and it took a while because he likes to talk. But the editing process, Gordon Ramsay came on and said, "I've been told I'm going to make lots of mistakes tonight and not to worry about it. But if I can tell you, this is the whole audience, by the way. If I make one mistake tonight, you're all invited to one of my restaurants." So 5 minutes later, he made about 20 mistakes. And Paul Merton looked at his watch and said, "Well, I'm free on Thursday, Gordon." And everyone laughed. And then he called Paul Merton a rude word.
Right.
And then
Gordon Ramsay swore.
Gordon Ramsay swore. Yeah, I know. It's unbelievable.
This goes against all we know about him.
He went through the C ceiling, and Paul doesn't like bad language that much. Actually, he said, "Listen, Mush." He's called Gordon. He said, "Listen, Mush. I don't come into your kitchen telling you how to knock up a steak kidney pie. Don't come on this show and start throwing your weight around." And I think Gordon Ramsay, if you spoke to him today, said it wasn't a very. I don't think he enjoyed. He was out of his comfort zone.
Well, it's a gamble for a guest host, isn't it? To that point about editing, you remind me of the very early days of The Apprentice. This is like the indiscreet story, where it wasn't clear who was going to present it. In America, The Apprentice was presented by somebody called Donald Trump, TV presenter.
What happened to him?
Here in the UK, we need a big business figure, and as you would expect, there was a lot of discussion with the BBC. Names were thrown around, kind of Richard Branson or whatever. Then the idea of Alan Sugar came up, and the BBC weren't very keen. And they said he's a bit of a has-been from the 80s, because he'd had Amstrad in the 80s, remember. After that, all he'd done was run Tottenham Hotspur for a while.
But he made a fortune with Amstrad.
Yeah, no. He's a very, very successful businessman. Nobody's doubting that, but he wasn't very current at the time. But the other point after watching the audition tape that the BBC made was, well, he's quite slow and he's not funny or witty. And a guy called Peter Moore, who was our exec, who was on it, simply said to the BBC, "He'll edit well. I'll make him brilliant." He did.
And this is when
editing. This is the beginning of The Apprentice when we were first doing it.
But you produced that?
Yeah. It was a talkback production.
Was it? Oh God, I forgot that.
Yeah.
Oh, blimey.
Yeah, came over from
Yeah.
America. It was one of those things. Fremantle occasionally would buy a format in America that was a hit and then bring it to not just to us in the UK, but to all their other territories and say, "Guys, you want to go out and sell it?"
Yeah.
So in the case of The Apprentice, even though we made it quite different from the Donald Trump version, it was obviously a brilliant format, but it wasn't obvious who would present it. But Peter Moore was right.
Yeah.
Alan Sugar, editing's a wonderful thing. You can make Alan Sugar look witty and quick-witted.
Yeah.
Neither of which, frankly, he really was. Then there was another one. The reason I mentioned the other one is that we're actually making a series about it at Expectation. It was a series that they bought in America called The Swan. Have you heard of this?
No.
Okay, so The Swan was a series where people competed to win plastic surgery because they want to have a new nose or plumped up lips or something like that.
Why they call it a swan? Not.
Well, because the duckling turns into the swan. The ugly duckling turns into the swan.
Oh, nice.
So it's called The Swan.
You've got to do too much work to work that one out as a title.
Well, you can probably do it in the
too much
trail.
math.
The marketing can deal with that.
That's too much math.
So Fremantle bought it and said kind of, great news, guys. We bought the latest hit in America, The Swan. And we looked at it. When I say we, it was me and my colleague at the time, Daisy Goodwin.
Yes.
We looked and said, well, we're not going to go and sell it.
Yeah.
We don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
It's repugnant.
Yes.
And Fremantle were very pleased about this. That's not how it works. We buy things, you sell them. So no. Our reputation here in the UK rests with having some kind of judgment, some discretion as to what we go out and sell. And this idea, the Swan, is a repugnant idea. But so Expectation, are making a series about it now, which is kind of like the recent series about America's Top Model, or another series we made a couple of years ago about Miriam, the reality show with Miriam. Do you remember this one?
No.
This is the show where a kind of 8 red-blooded young men compete for the hand of this beautiful girl called Miriam. Except she's not a girl. She's trans. She was born as a man.
Right.
These are all examples of shows that at the time people thought, this is kind of at the edge of what you can do in a reality show. But in the culture of 2026, you look at it and think, how could you have done that? That's shocking.
Yeah.
Shocking television. And, revisionism is going on all the time. There's a series being made, I think, by 72 Films, who are very good, about the X Factor. And not that the X Factor involved plastic surgery or...
Well, not on the contestants. I think there's a fair amount.
What's said about that.
There's a fair amount of Botox going on the panel, I would have thought.
But I was, pretty heavily involved in the X Factor, both running talkback temps who made it and then at ITV commissioned it. And the lens of 2026, shining, looking at something from that era through a modern lens, looks a bit different.
Well, as you're talking, I was thinking about that. I mean, remember when B Sky B launched? It was called B Sky B to begin with.
Yes.
And it became Sky. The great Paul Jackson, who, was the producer of The Young Ones and went on to great things. I think he was the first head of comedy or director of programs of it. And they commissioned a sitcom called Heil Honey, I'm Home.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
About Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun moving in next door to a Jewish family.
Was it
Even at the
written
time-
by Jewish writers? Am I right in thinking that? I think that may have been
don't know.
line of defence of it, but it never aired, did it?
No, but I mean, imagine pitching that now.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't. I mean, that's a slightly different form of unacceptable from a reality
Yeah.
show that offers people plastic surgery as a prize, which feels so distasteful, but in a completely different sort of way. And of course, it's inevitable and not even wrong that what looks right in one era will look wrong in another era. I mean, you wouldn't commission Till Death Us Do Part today. You wouldn't commission
Which I
Mind
think
Your
is
Language.
I think is a shame.
Well, you lose, you throw baby out with the bathwater. don't
I think
you?
it's a shame
You lose
because-
a great comedy,
Yeah.
but certainly, you need to be our age and beyond to remember Till Death Us Do Part that the central character Alf Garnett, played by Warren Mitchell, was a great sitcom character, but he was outwardly racist.
He was a bigot.
He was a bigot. And he was
And
all those bad things.
but the people in the show laughed at him,
They did laughed at him,
and they laughed at him, and he was
he was a prototype reform voter, wasn't he?
yeah,
Really?
totally. But he was a figure of fun.
But it'd be interesting to see, what programs today that people make and people enjoy. In 10, 15 years' time, you'll think, oh, wow, can't believe they did that. Very hard to say. The nature of a changing culture is that you don't see what's around the corner. I mean, if you take the X Factor, which after all ran until about 5 years ago and was in its heyday.
What's wrong with that?
I mean, if you turned up for an audition, an X Factor audition, and you sort of could sing okay, you probably wouldn't make the cut. If you could sing like an angel, you make the cut. If you can't sing for toffee, you make the cut.
So you mock them.
And then Simon Cowell says something like, have you had professional singing lessons? And the person says, yes. And he says, you should ask for your money back. Goodbye. And the person goes off in tears.
Yeah, and
And
kills
that
himself.
was the stuff of the X Factor. And today it looks like bullying.
Well, it's called punching down.
Yeah. It just looks like cruel and mean and all that kind of stuff.
Simon Cowell? I find that hard to believe.
So there must be shows today that will one day be embarrassed by.
maybe
But
our-
I'm damned if I know what they are.
Maybe our listeners can write in with a list.
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
can read them out. 'Cause
What do we love today that we'll one day think, I can't believe I watched that and enjoyed it? Now, something I want to talk about.
Yes.
And I'm just interested to know how your experience with this is. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had the launch of HBO Max.
Yeah, exciting.
You noticed that?
Yeah.
I mean, it crops up everywhere. I noticed
have.
if I order an Uber, I'm waiting for my Uber and there's an advert for HBO Max. But when
you
I
can
tried
block
it-
that, by the way. You know.
Can
yeah,
I?
you can.
Know
You
that.
can block that. Yeah.
I know you don't order your own Ubers,
No.
Jimmy, so this wouldn't be an
I do
experience
now,
for you.
actually.
Do you? Okay, you're joining the people.
Yeah.
So why? I don't know if you found this. There was a football match the other day that
Yes.
I needed to get onto HBO
don't.
Max. Yeah. And then I suddenly find a thing
Champions
saying,
League?
yeah, so
Yeah.
we're 20 minutes into the game and I'm still struggling with QR codes.
Yeah.
And then it wants me to put in my login details for Discovery Plus or something like
Yeah.
that. Then I got a thing saying you need to resubscribe.
Yes.
And I thought, I don't trust this because you mean I'm going to be paying you twice. And I somehow got there in the end, but I'd missed a couple of goals and it was very annoying. And
Yeah. No, I had exactly the same experience.
surely, if you're HBO Max, you have seen the launch of your service a mile off. You've been able to plan for it, and you would think, make it very easy for the user to get on it. But it
Can I
seems to
explain
me to be
something?
very confusing.
It's owned obviously by Warner Brothers Discovery, right?
Indeed.
And they also own TNT, which is this big sports thing.
Yeah.
Which
So
I subscribe to.
TNT has, and
now
we subscribe to as well.
So I
yeah.
thought, oh, great. But no, it's not that simple because the whole the journey, my journey the other night of trying to get from TNT to HBO Max had me shouting,
you turning to Alf Garnett.
me
as he's throwing
shouting at a
things at the
television screen, and my wife laughing at me.
So is it just you and me? Are you and I the only people among people who would like to watch HBO Max, who at the moment would feel, I'm not going to subscribe to your bloody service.
Have you watched The Pit on it yet?
No, I don't. My wife's watched it from beginning to end.
My wife has watched it, the whole thing.
I don't know about you, Jim, but medical dramas, I'm never down for medical dramas. They always make me think I've got those symptoms, or I don't want to hear about some obscure disease, because I'll end up thinking you've got it.
Well, one episode was about a pregnancy, so I think you'd be safe. I think you'd be safe there.
I watched Call the Midwife. It's a kind of medical drama. No, The Pit. People tell me The Pit's brilliant.
It's brilliant. Yeah.
But when I say people, I mean my wife.
It's a 15-hour. Is it 15 episodes? And each hour is a.
It's sort of ER in modern age.
Yeah, but it's in real time.
Okay.
Is
it single shot?
No, it's not like Boiling Point, but it's basically a kind of it's a high octane, thriller set in an ER with Noel Wiley, who was in ER as a young man, and now he's a grizzled, middle-aged veteran.
I know I won't get around to it, because I just never do with medical dramas. But it's just sticky on HBO Max for a minute. So HBO Max's cheapest package is priced at $4.99 a month with ads, undercutting rivals Netflix, Disney and Paramount by £1. And I find that when I sort of consider this sort of thing, I find I have two totally contradictory thoughts. On the one hand, that's not very much money, because $4.99 a month compared with a Sky subscription really isn't very much. But on the other hand, how many of those are you willing to pay? And the nature of any subscription, and somebody once explained this to me, how do subscription-based businesses, how do they thrive? Partly on inertia, because you've pressed a button, subscribed, and then you forget you've subscribed. You go on paying this $4.99 a month, even though you might not watch it. But I'd be fascinated to know, this isn't really our expertise at all, but people in the kind of pricing, marketing expertise, are we reaching peak subscription demand on viewers? Well, I'm not saying rip-off, because for your $4.99 a month, look at what you get.
You can watch Friends.
You've got Harry Potter. You've got one battle after another. You've got HBO shows like The Sopranos, Band of Brothers, The Wire, Succession. I mean, that'll keep me going for a long time.
Yeah.
But are we reaching some peak in terms of the number of subscriptions people are going to
But also
take
I think
up?
that it's just the, when I sometimes go through my subscriptions on my phone, you can
Yeah.
and then you see, why have I
Why did I subscribe to the National Geographic magazine?
What is that?
Yeah,
what even is that? And you find out it's some
Bird Watching Monthly.
It's a curation of all the best articles written, this year or something, which you're never going to read.
No, it's a good kind of spring cleaning thing to do.
But I spoke once to a digital marketing guy who said,
"You lived a life."
No, he said, it was really interesting conversation, and he said we can boost people's revenues online now by putting a QR code in the corner of a screen when they're watching content they like. We can have a call to action on a QR code that they can actually get merchandising from that artist or from that piece of content.
Yes.
And he said, because people's brains are now because we're creating millions and millions of people with neurodiversity and ADHD and lack of impulse control, quote, he said, they click on the QR code even without thinking about it. And suddenly they're buying something they don't necessarily want because it's so easy. And I think that's part of
QR codes are very clever, aren't they?
Yeah.
You point your phone at the telly.
Yeah.
It seems to still be out of focus and about that large in the screen, and yet the thing comes up. And I agree. QR codes.
We sound like two monkeys in front of typewriters.
It's a well-known fact that if you leave enough monkeys in front of a typewriter for long
It'll
enough,
eat the typewriter.
No, they'll write Shakespeare.
Oh yeah. Okay. Good luck. Well, maybe Titus Andronicus, but all right. So I do want to just. I know we talk about the BBC a bit.
Okay. Yes.
But I do want to talk
BBC moment.
No, I want to talk about the Executive Complaints Unit.
Right.
You were just talking about Hugh Bonneville playing the head of integrity, or the head of values. Well, there is a whole department at the BBC called the Executive Complaints Unit, and they're there to adjudicate on whether a complaint made by one of the audience is to be upheld or not.
Who is in this unit? Is it just sort of
I think-
BBC?
no,
Are there any independent outsiders?
they-
Is it just BBC
They're
bigwigs?
they're a bit like ICE, and they all wear masks because they can't have their identities known.
Yeah.
Mainly because they'd be laughed at in the street.
Yeah.
Because this, I think, is a waste of license fee money. Because it's
Well, hang on. We want the BBC to take complaints,
yes, but then
deal with them with a due process.
well, then you could complain to the boss. Complain,
Can you complain about the complaints unit?
I think I think you're right. You need some kind of transparency. We've had thousands of complaints, but let's talk about the story this week. The story this week is the Executive Complaints Unit have just decided, many weeks later, that the racial slur that was inadvertently blurted out at the BAFTA Awards by
By the mammoth
John
Tourette's.
Davison,
Yeah.
who suffers from Tourette's, who had no intention of doing so, but was forced to by his condition, to blurt out the racial slur. The Executive Complaints Unit of the BBC has now said, yes, it was a mistake to do that.
It breached BBC's
It
editorial
breached
standards.
the editorial standards, and to leave it on the iPlayer was a serious mistake. Well,
Well,
but we know that.
No shit, Sherlock.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so how many hours were spent adjudicating on that? And, recently we did a joke on Have I Got News For You, where we talked about David Beckham calling the Honours Committee in 2013 a bunch of C words. Yeah, a bunch of...
I was going to say a bunch of twats.
Oh, yeah. And
Not acceptable.
I think maybe we can... It's a quote. And,
Yeah.
and so we used it in the show as a quote. It was an email
Yes.
he sent. And Maisie Adams then said something very funny, which got a big laugh. Catherine Ryan then said, I'm not sure we are allowed to say the C word on the BBC, but we did mention Victoria Beckham a little while ago, so we'll accept that. So it got a big laugh from the audience, and it went through all the editorial processes. But now, 6 months later, we're now talking to the BBC. I don't know whether we've resolved it or not yet, and what I should be talking about it, but we're going back and forth, wasting a lot of time. 3 complaints. We had 3 complaints. 6 million people watched the show that week, and we had 3 complaints.
And still some process
And
is
still
going on.
some person at this.
I don't want to come out. Well, I don't mind coming out in sympathy with the BBC. I mean, it's one of those things. However you deal with complaints, you either look like a sledgehammer to crack a nut, you overdo it, or you underdo it. When I was at the BBC, by the way, talking the T word, twat, there was a memo, famous memo, which obviously was known as the Twat Memo, explaining that depending on which part of the country you're in,
Yes.
that word is less.
Well, some people say
ruder.
twat.
From where I come from. But my memory is that Yorkshire's the place. You can't, I mean, in Yorkshire, possibly because there's a disproportionate number of twats in Yorkshire,
yeah.
it's a particularly rude slur.
Yeah.
We just lost all our Yorkshire listeners.
Yeah, no people are listening in Yorkshire, don't worry. Not to insiders of the TV
Whereas in the South, it's quite a mild word that, you might call somebody a twat just as a sort of calling them an idiot. Did you know that? What about Liverpool, Jim? Were you called a twat as a child?
No, we don't use bad language in Liverpool.
No.
It's a stereotype,
Yeah.
which we're trying to shrug off. No, there was one complaint we had, which was Paul Merton made a joke about Brian Blessed had hosted Have I Got News To You the previous week, and the following week, Paul Merton said to the then host, I forget, maybe Alexander Armstrong, "Oh, we had Brian Blessed on last week. He's quite loud." Everyone laughed. He said, in fact, they found his family this week, and they were in a dungeon underneath his house. Apparently, they built it themselves, right? So there was a kind of mild reference to that awful story of
Fritzl.
Fritzl. Yeah. So a man in Belgium who's watching the show illegally complains to the BBC.
Seriously.
And the BBC pass it on to us. So I apologise.
Hang on, Fritzl wasn't Belgian. He was Austrian.
I know, but this was a viewer.
European. Yeah.
Fritz wasn't complaining.
They keep families in their basement out there.
It wasn't Fritz complaining. It was some bloke in Belgium. So we write back and say, clearly it wasn't a joke about that terrible story. It was a joke about Brian Blessed being very loud and his family wanting some peace and quiet. So that's the end of it. Oh, no. We get another call from the BBC saying, the man has now written to the Director General and the Director General would like you to apologise again. I thought, well, I've apologised once. And the rule is you apologise and then you move on. So I wrote back to him again and I said, I'm enclosing the link to a very good hobbies website. I suggest you get a hobby. Well, I got into terrible trouble with the BBC for that.
So there's a couple more stories about the BBC. One is in the BBC Children's has promoted the head of digital media to the newly created role of head of YouTube. The role has been devised for the BBC's landmark deal with YouTube, which will see it create original content for the platform for the first time. Now, I know you're big on this subject, Jim, and on YouTube, and it's kind of, funny enough, it was when I was at the BBC in the mid-2000s, YouTube came into being.
Yeah, it did. It's 20 years
And
old.
everybody felt very threatened by it. But they absolutely wouldn't have foreseen a world in which the BBC would have had a head of YouTube.
So
and one reason being that people thought YouTube was forever and a day going to be about very short video clips. That was seen as the threat, that people's attention span had shrunk to 90 seconds, as it were. And the problem with television in the old sense of the word was that it was long things, programs. But of course, arguably, YouTube has moved into that world and conquered all its rivals. It's an eye-catching announcement, and the BBC, like other organisations, always likes an eye-catching announcement. Why are we talking about it?
So they're going
because
heavy.
they made a thing of it, haven't they?
So they're going to launch 7 channels of content aimed at children.
Yes. Is this stuff? I mean,
So they're
I
going
feel I ought
heavy
to
in on
know,
the children.
Is this stuff you won't get to see on BBC iPlayer? Surely not. You must see it on BBC
No,
iPlayer as
it's
well.
not for the iPlayer. And in fact, they're quite. I had a meeting with the really smart people in there, and they said, "Well, actually, we think YouTube content is different to produce content for TV and iPlayer. You don't want it to be overproduced.
Yeah,
you don't.
Yeah,
want
but hang on. Let's just scrutinise the use of licence payers' money here, because you're then putting the money on YouTube. Are the BBC then going to try to get some revenue out of it on YouTube? I mean, you'd think so, wouldn't you?
Well, you can speak to this much better than me. Is that the value for the BBC is not in terms of their broadcast, although is this broadcast? Well, it's not broadcast, it's digital. Is the value is in the eyeballs watching it, not necessarily the money that they're making out of it. They make money for BBC studios. But you're right, can they sell advertising on that content? Will they sell advertising on that content? It strikes me that they should.
I think it's
Be a
a
good little
sign
earner.
of, I mean, this announcement's a sign of the times, clearly, but is it the thin end of a very long wedge, or is it the BBC smartly thinking a little bit ahead of the curve?
Good luck to them.
I genuinely not sure what I think.
Well, there is money to be made on YouTube, and
I'm not, yeah, but again, to go back to what you were just saying, I'm not thinking in terms of money to be made. I'm thinking in terms of
the value.
the purpose of the BBC, how
to
it
reach
justifies the
audience.
license.
Children are watching things on YouTube.
So you think that bolsters the case for the license? But what about that very familiar argument that the case of license fee rests on the BBC doing things that the market isn't doing, and doing things that are distinctive and different?
Well, it can still do that. It can still point cameras at the cenotaph.
Yeah.
That's the balancing act, isn't it? We're going to do stuff which gathers the community, the nation together for moments of national importance, but also we need to be entertaining and commercial and do things that ITV do, but do them in a different way. Like they've got Gladiators on, and they've got and then they'll do Remembrance Sunday. So
Sure.
I don't think it's either or, is it?
No. Well, I mean, so the other story
We
about the-
complain if the BBC wasn't actually looking at this
I
stuff.
don't think we're complaining. I think we're musing on it and reflecting on it. So if that's the story that's pointing to the future, here the other BBC story of the week is one that sort of points slightly in the other direction, which is that BBC Studios events production is to have its headcount significantly reduced, or as the Times chose to put it in a rather more emotive way, BBC to dismantle crown jewel of live British broadcasting. Now,
Okay, let's
that's
unpack
a very
this.
yeah, exactly.
Let's unpack that, because that's not entirely what the facts are. How many people are in this department, Peter?
It turns out there were 6 permanent roles.
6.
Yeah.
And it's now down to 1, Claire Popplewell.
Yeah. And of course, they will still cover big state occasions, but they'll use freelancers. So it's, in a way, it's a point that we've made in recent weeks on the podcast, that it's very hard to get the headcount of the BBC down. This is a way you get the headcount down. But then the same newspapers who will be complaining about the BBC being overstaffed and full of fat, now lay into it and come up with a headline like BBC to dismantle crown jewel of live British broadcasting. Now, to be fair, the Times in this case, are aided and abetted than none other than David Dimbleby, TV royalty by his standards, who's told the Times that the decision is catastrophic and an absolute disgrace. Dimbleby went on to say, it's a tiny group of people, that's true, who really know their business. I don't know what the savings are. I imagine they're minuscule, but whatever kind of bean counter has done this, I cannot imagine, because it's an own goal of such an obvious kind.
Okay, so can I just say,
yes,
now, I saw the interview on BBC News. For some reason, I was watching BBC 24 News, probably first time in my life, but it was on. You were
trying to get onto HBO Max.
I was
you
trying.
Failed.
It was part of the journey.
You couldn't watch the football match, so you thought, I'll watch BBC News.
It was a stopping off point on the way to HBO Max, and he was banging on about this, and I thought, he just doesn't know what he's talking about.
David
Dimbleby.
Are you accusing David Dimbleby not knowing?
He sounded like
he's a very august figure.
He's you know what? I just think that he served fantastically. Served BBC really well at these state occasions, but he's retired.
He's become a bit more disinhibited in his later
and have a nice retirement, David.
Well, I don't know if he has retired. He still makes series.
Oh,
Jim.
for goodness sake! But he comes back and he starts pronouncing on this in the most inaccurate way. Do you know these big events have been staffed by freelancers for years?
Well, so you make the proms, don't you? At
Well,
Hattrick?
a company with
tell
which
me
I've
how many
got,
permanent employees you have on the proms.
So, Guy Freeman, who is
your equivalent of Claire Popperwell,
was one of the BBC Studios' most eminent producers. He was the last person to produce Eurovision for the BBC in 1998. And he's a brilliant live events. He does the Edinburgh Tattoo. He did a concert for Ukraine. He set up in 3 weeks after the invasion at the NEC. I don't know how he does it, because it's the most stressful things you can produce. When the BBC put the proms out for tender, he got the gig. So Livewire, his company, produced the proms. It won a BAFTA last year. I think the first time the proms has won the BAFTA. So he's very well equipped to do these shows. And the truth is, we did some research. We pitched for Eurovision when it was going to be in Liverpool. I thought, why not? It's great. Liverpool. I'm from Liverpool. Guy wants to do it. Guy has produced the Eurovision. I approached the BBC to be told, oh, no. BBC Studios are doing it. I said, oh. He said, yes. Well, they've been working on it for 18 months now. I said, but you were only told that Liverpool was doing it in the last month. How come? Oh, it's a cycle. So I did some research. All these big events, the last 10 years, Platinum in the Park, all these big concerts, royal family concerts, all done by BBC Studios, never been farmed out to the independent sector. And the truth is that I said it's a bit like the Freemasons. It's BBC Freemasonry where the BBC Studios gets the gig. So they get the glory, they get the income from these big shows, but clearly people working on the shows are all freelancers.
But surely
so nothing's changed. So they got rid of 5 people.
That's not good if you're one of those 5 people. But surely doing that weakens the case for keeping them as a BBC production monopoly going forward.
I agree.
You've no longer got the department, so you could put them out to tender and Hattrick. This is not something we do at Expectation, or we haven't done, but you have Guy Freeman. Yeah. And Guy is a very, very, very experienced person in this area. Did you say he does the Edinburgh Tattoo?
Yeah.
If he makes that entertaining, he's a genius. You ever
been
to the Edinburgh Tattoo?
It's a laugh a minute.
Oh, blimey, mate. It's cold up there as
maybe
well.
That's one of those shows in the future we'll look back on and say, how could they possibly make that show? That's colonialism gone mad. No, but I think that's where David Dimbleby got it wrong. Is it's not about these freelancers won't have the kind of expertise that the BBC Studios have. BBC Studios is populated, every production, as you know, is populated by a lot of really good freelance people.
Yes.
And so when Guy does the proms, we set it up, we have brilliant people who do other things during the year when the proms is not on.
Yeah, I think
there.
But I think the truth is, if you're the Times who wrote this story and put this headline out there, I don't think you really understand the difference between freelancers and people who come.
No, they just want to slag off the BBC.
Our friend Matt Britton, who's now about to start, this is a kind of a squall. This isn't a
No,
storm.
this is irrelevant.
These have come along every 2 or 3 weeks.
But, Dimbleby uses words like catastrophic and absolute disgrace. Just go for a walk in the park, David. It's,
I'd just like to say, I know David Dimbleby. He's a very nice man, David.
I'm sure he's very nice. He just
And a very eminent broadcaster.
Well, he made himself sound like a bit of an arse on this.
He's made himself maybe sound getting a bit old and out of touch, and God knows you and I know about that.
Well, I think the idea of old men having opinions is it should be banned.
We're going to stop soon, are we? On that bombshell, I think we've probably done enough, haven't we?
All right.
That's all for this week. Thanks very much for listening. Are there any questions about the world of television you've always wanted to ask? Send them our way. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, you can send us an email or you can get us on our socials. And all the info is in the description.
Even better yet, why not subscribe to our YouTube channel? Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please do follow Insiders, the TV podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.